Plenty more to get to. And this is the question, right? It's 8:45. I teased it at the beginning of the show. What situation would you rather be right now? The Detroit Lions or the Jacksonville Jaguars? And I know for Lions fans, it's like, what? What are you talking about? And I'll tell you why. And this was first proposed, at least on Twitter, by Colton Pouncey, and he does great work for The Athletic, and he put out just a thread of this. Who would you rather be, the Detroit Lions or the Jacksonville Jaguars? You can go check that out. Again, Colton Pouncey on Twitter. But I thought, why not? Let's have this discussion. Because I think it's close. And this is two teams that had similar records last year. The Lions obviously beat down the Jacksonville Jaguars, but you can't look at it from one game and say, well, I'll just take the Lions. There's a lot of layers to this, Sam, right? You look at the Lions as a complete roster with all the young talent they have and what they found through Brad Holmes. There's a lot of guys you like, right? A lot of young players, defensively, offensively. But then you look at the Jags, and at least from a quarterback perspective, they have the better, at least up-and-coming quarterback. We don't know how good Trevor Lawrence can be. He's still very young, but the future's bright. There's no doubt about that. And then Doug Peterson, he won a Super Bowl. So say what you want. The Jacksonville Jaguars aren't some slouch, but I posed the question, and I'll ask you first, Sam Flannel. Who would you rather be right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Detroit Lions?
All right, so before I go, when I kind of sat down to do my prep for this segment, there are a lot of layers to this. First of all, let me give you where I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have the clear advantage. I think it matters that last year they won their division and won a home playoff game. I get them winning their division was kind of the luck of where they were placed, but still they had the experience of doing it, and the Lions do not have that yet. And Trevor Lawrence, of course, not only Trevor Lawrence, he's on a rookie contract for at least a couple of more years. And I think his ceiling is to be the second best quarterback in the NFL when it's all said and done after Patrick Mahomes. And I also think who they have in Travis Etienne, who is also on a rookie contract. This guy might be one of the most productive running backs in the entirety of the NFL this year. And obviously the wide receiver core and tight end room, especially with the addition of Calvin Ridley. If he can give you anything like he did his last year in Atlanta, oh my goodness.
And they already had a solid receiving core.
Absolutely they did, because Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, that cannot be ignored. And you already mentioned Doug Peterson, who right now I think is a coaching advantage over Dan Campbell. He should have a statue up in Philadelphia already as the one Super Bowl winning coach in Philadelphia Eagles history. And you saw what he did with this offense last year, unlocking the potential of Trevor Lawrence, along with having more personnel around him like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Travis Etienne. But still, Doug Peterson is kind of like their version of Ben Johnson, except he's the head coach and overseer of everything. But that being said, there is one reason why I would actually go with the Detroit Lions right now.
So you're picking the Lions?
I am picking the Detroit Lions, and here is why. Because of one man, Brad freaking Holmes. Because I actually wrote a little bit of a list. When you look at their draft classes year by year, you look at 2021 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That draft class is elite in terms of high-end talent. You've got Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Tyson Campbell were their first three picks. Dear God in heaven. But still, the Lions, they have Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Amon-Ra St. Brown being one of the better value picks of any draft in the last 5 years or so. And even Aleem McNeil, I'm not going to put him on that level just yet, but still, you got Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But where they really separate themselves, where in terms of young talent, young cheap talent right now, is that 2022 draft. You look at the first overall pick versus the second overall pick. You got Trayvon Walker at 1. The Jaguars gave a gift by gifting us Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's the better player right now. I don't think anyone would disagree with it. And then, of course, the Jags 2022 draft. I think Devin Lloyd, we can all agree thus far, is a hit. But when you look a little bit deeper, their third-round pick, Luke Fortner, he's their starting center, but he wasn't really anything special last year.
He ain't no Frank Ragnow.
And I'll tell you what, look at our third-round pick in Kirby Joseph, who forced 6 turnovers. They had Chad Muma also in the third round. Again, a solid backup last year, but only 47 tackles. You look at their fifth-round pick, Snoop Connor. 12 carries, 42 yards last year. I'm not writing home about Snoop Connor. And then you got Gregory Jr., that's his actual name, played 1 game last year. He was a 6th-round pick. And then you look at Monteric Brown, who last year had 6 tackles total. So when you look at those diamond in the rough peeps, the Jacksonville Jaguars thus far have not had them. You look at the 2022 draft for the Detroit Lions. I already mentioned Aiden Hutchinson. He's a future superstar. I think he's already trending that way. I mentioned Kirby Joseph, a 3rd-round pick for 6 turnovers. I mentioned the 6th-round pick parlay of James Houston, 8 sacks in 7 games. Malcolm Rodriguez, all rookie linebacker. And then you even look at Jamison Williams, who we think will emerge this year when he gets back from suspension, and Josh Pascal, who he himself had a little bit of a lost rookie season. Although he played more games, he had a 2-sack game and showed some flashes. So I think that 2022 draft class is really what's going to be one of the ones that turn it around and help shape the future. But I'm not even done yet. We look at the 2023 draft class. We all know that it is very, very, very unproven. It's the definition of unproven because they're all rookies, right? But I'd say the Lions draft class of working out has a little bit better of a shot than the Jaguars, because the Lions had 4 picks out of the first 45, and 3 of them are already listed as starters on the Detroit Lions depth chart according to the ESPN Detroit Lions depth chart website. Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, and Sam Laporta. And we didn't even mention Brian Branch, who's listed as a 2nd string, but he might be the best rookie of them all when it's all said and done. It wouldn't shock me at all. And the Jaguars had 1 pick in the first 45, Anton Harrison, who is listed as a starter, and then you had a pick at 61 in Bretton Strange, but a lot of lower round picks which the Jacksonville Jaguars have not shown an ability to hit. Did you hear the names I mentioned for them in the 2022 draft versus the Detroit Lions?
Gregory Jr.?
Gregory Jr., that is, I couldn't believe that.
Yes. All you need to say there, Flannel, with that one.
Yes, and to kind of put the cherry on top of why I would choose the Detroit Lions, besides the fact that I think they're built for more sustained success, in my opinion, at least with them drafting so many good players. The AFC is just tougher right now because the Jacksonville... Listen to all these teams. You got the Chiefs, they're better. The Bills, they're better. The Bengals have proven to be better. I don't know if they will be this year, but that's up for debate. Are the Jacksonville Jaguars definitively better than the Chargers? I know they beat them in the playoffs this year, but the Chargers are a threat. The Browns, the Steelers, the Ravens, even the Broncos, I think we all expect a little bit of a bounce back. The Jets, the Dolphins, those are all teams that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to have to get through, and more so than all the Kansas City Chiefs. How many good up-and-coming teams, how many Super Bowl appearances did the Patriots take away from the Colts, even the Chargers, even like the Steelers, teams like that? Quite a few, and I think the Chiefs will have that kind of effect on teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars. They already beat them in the playoffs this year. I think it is much more likely that the Lions win the NFC than the Jaguars win the AFC this year, and even in the future. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars can hit their potential. Like Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, their linebacking core, they all kind of hit their ceiling, and they still never win an AFC because it is so goddamn tough. I just, with all that being said, with the way they're built, with the way the NFC is set up versus the AFC, I know the Jacksonville Jaguars have some advantages, but I am going with, I would much rather be right now the Detroit Lions.
Flannel?
Yes.
Do one of these for me. Mic drop, baby. You were cooking there, Flannel.
Thank you.
Flannel was cooking.
Thank you.
You were cooking with sauce.
Thank you.
Chef, what do you got to say?
So, okay. And now, listen, Flannel was cooking, and he made a lot of great points. And I think the biggest points of this whole conversation is the conference the Jags are in, because if you told me the Jags, and let's just say hypothetically the Jags were in the NFC, I would probably go with the Jags. Because, again, finding a franchise quarterback is one of the hardest things you can do. And for a guy like Trevor, who's going to be around for this organization for another 15 years, like, that's tough. But he's in the AFC, to your point.
Yeah.
And let's go through the quarterbacks you're going to be facing in the playoffs. Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Herbert, all under 28 years old.
That's another great point.
They're going to be around for a while. So that's really the big thing for me. The Lions, you could bring up the roster and people would say, well, why would you give Trevor Lawrence that nod already over Jared Goff? Well, Jared Goff is 28 years old, and he had a great season last year, and he's going to turn 29 next season. Trevor Lawrence is young, and he already the year he had last year, at least the second half, he was one of the hottest quarterbacks behind Jared Goff. So let's not act like Trevor Lawrence is some slouch either. Like, he's on a great trajectory as well. He finally has a competent head coach in Doug Peterson, so he'll be all right. But that conference is tough. Like, you're talking about 5 guys that you're going to have to consistently battle to even make an AFC championship game. Now, the Lions, the big, I guess the David versus Goliath, you're facing the 49ers and the Eagles, which, talk about quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, he's great, but he had one good year, and then the 49ers don't really know who their quarterback is, but you know how great their team is. So if you give me, Jeff, what situation would you rather have because of the conference, because of the quarterbacks who the Jags are facing? You have to lean Lions because as a roster, I'll take the Lions roster as a whole over the Jags, right? The offensive line, the defensive line, and where they're projected to go, the secondary as well. I love Tyson Campbell, but a complete secondary, the Lions are trending towards that right now. And they keep having great draft classes. Like, let's go even above the team. I would rather have Brad Holmes over Trent Baalke. I would rather have Sheila Ford Hamp over ownership of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Or whatever.
Nut job.
So we're going like deeper into this, right? Ownership, front office, players. Now, the only thing I would be hesitant in is quarterback. But if that's the only thing, you have to bring up the conference he's in. Like, again, if Trevor Lawrence was in the NFC, you'd be like, man, he might be the best quarterback in this conference. Or probably would be. But he's in the AFC, and that does change things. So I guess if you're asking me what situation I'd rather be, if I'm trying to win a Super Bowl, to get there, I mean, the path would have to be the NFC. So I'd have to go with the Detroit Lions for that roster because you don't even need a Trevor Lawrence in the NFC to make the Super Bowl, at least where the quarterback play is. I mean, Dak Prescott's in this conference, and they're a top 3 team. Like, Dak Prescott, you look at the top 5 quarterbacks, where would Dak rank? Mahomes in the AFC. Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, Herbert, like he's down that list. But in the NFC, he's up there. So easier competition for the Detroit Lions. I think as a roster, they're trending upwards. And I would probably go with the Detroit Lions as well. The only thing, like I said, is quarterback. But it's hard when you're in the AFC, Lucas, and you got to face all these dudes who are also franchise and elite quarterbacks.
Yeah, this is tough. This is really tough. Because I don't want to sound like a homer at the same time, but it's like, if you were to drop the Jags roster in like the NFC South right now instead of the AFC South, I think we would all like be like heavy favorites. Like, Jags could easily be the 1 seed in the NFC just because of how they're built. But the fact that they're in the AFC, not only with the teams around them, but the coaches in the AFC. I mean, if you just go even with the teams that are kind of on the edge, like the Steelers, the Broncos, you can say what you want about the Ravens. The coaching depth in the AFC is insane. So even those teams that they're not as talented as the Jags, but when it comes to playoff time, the teams that are very highly coached, that could easily knock you out and you're just not really thinking about it, even those teams in the AFC are even deeper. So it's like a 55-45 for me. I think the thing that kind of tilts the meter is Brad Holmes and the fact that you guys already said, I'm not going to harp on it more, that they're in the NFC. But, yeah, it's close. I think the Jags could easily be like, I mean, just because they're in the AFC South, they could be the 1-2 in the AFC this year.
Yeah.
But, again, that doesn't mean that they go as far in the playoffs when that regular season record really doesn't matter anymore.
Like you're talking about, look at the comparison between first-round matchups. Like, let's say, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they win their division again, and let's say they'll get a Justin Herbert for their first game when the Detroit Lions could get a New Orleans Saints, or they could get a Seattle Seahawks team. Like, talk about competition. Like, for the Jacksonville Jaguars to get to an AFC Championship game or get to a Super Bowl, you're potentially going to have to beat Herbert, Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, any of these guys.
Aaron Rodgers now?
Rodgers. Yeah. Is he making the Super Bowl, Sam Flannel?
No.
Okay. Just testing it. But you might have to face... Say it, Flannel. You might have to face an Aaron Rodgers as well. So that's the path to success. So, again, if people would say, well, what are you talking about? The Jacksonville Jaguars have a better roster. It's not extremely better. And you talk about the conference they're in, really? Like, that's tough. That's tough. And that's where I would say, because you look at the AFC South, that there's another argument. Well, who else is a threat in that division? That NFC North ain't looking much better.
Yeah,
so,
I think it's a draw. Like, really, AFC South, NFC
now,
North.
the AFC South has younger quarterbacks, which always is great, right? Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud. But Justin Fields, Jordan Love, I think that the divisions are similar, and give me the Lions in the NFC.
Yeah, and
the NFC and Brad Holmes are the two biggest factors for me.
Well, and also another thing that I didn't even bring up when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars too, and I'll get this out really quick, and then I will go to JB, of course, is that their offensive line can't touch the Lions' offensive line.
I mean, with a 100-foot pole.
Like Brandon Sheriff and a lot of question marks, and then you even look at their defensive line and edge rusher depth versus the Lions' defensive line and edge rusher depth. I would take the Lions any day of the week, and even in the secondary, I think if you put all those two secondaries together, Tyson Campbell might right now at this moment be the best overall player, but when you go to depth, it is the Lions every day of the week and twice on Sundays. And yes, JB, I want to get your thoughts on this. Are we unanimous in this room that the Lions have a better situation, albeit by not that much?
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm taking the Jags on this. No.
Are you?
No, come on
Voice of
now.
reason.
Come on now. If anything, I'm the biggest Lions homer that there is here. But, of course, I'm going to pick the Lions as well. But I have to give credit to the Jags, too, just because if you look at the track history on both of these franchises, they have not had consistent success. And it's finally starting to show now with this slow rebuild. But, once again, I'm still going to have to go with the Lions, just because, as what you said earlier this week, Flannel, you know, a lot of people might not like you, but for one day, for one moment, they will at least appreciate your takes and agree with you. And I have to agree with you again with the whole Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, because it's not just about getting getting players out here on this field just to field the team. It's about getting the right players, and I feel like that's something that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done together collectively. Yes, they can sit here and look at tape on Jalen Carter and all these other athletes and sit there and look at both of each other in the face and be like, you know what, we're going to pass on them because it doesn't fit what we want to build here as a team, our culture. That's why they skipped on Jalen Carter, and that's why we got Jahmyr Gibbs, a speedy running back that's also going to benefit us as a wide receiver as well too. They look past all of this and everything that they've seen and just look at the tape and look and see that this is not a guy that fits what we're trying to build here. So, of course, I have to go with the Detroit Lions on this one.
Yeah, and just to get to some of these comments, Public Enemy, Jeff, stop making excuses for Trevor, because if he is him, it doesn't matter the conference, just win, baby. No, I understand that, but at the same time, it does matter. I mean, like I said, you're facing 5 guys that are all under 28 years old who are elite quarterbacks that are top 10. If you go through top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, half of them, or 60%, 70% of them probably, are in the AFC.
Absolutely.
And that's the hesitation for me. It's not even about Trevor. We're not sleeping on Trevor Lawrence. Trust me, he's elite, or he's going to be elite. But Jared Goff, too, it's not like a significant drop-off. Like, there's elite, and then there's guys that are, like, just fine, right? And Jared is one of those guys, but it doesn't mean you can't win with him. Like, it's not like you have frickin' Baker Mayfield as your starting quarterback. Like, Jared Goff's fine. Now, you go to coaches, Doug Peterson's proven. He's won a Super Bowl. That's the biggest thing. But Dan is trending upwards. This season is a big one for Dan, because if he comes out and wins 11, 12 games, now it's like, okay, yeah, this is the dude. But we still have to see it. But I'm confident he will trend upward. And then front office, it's not even close. I'll take Brad Holmes and Sheila. Like, those two, at least from a upper management and ownership perspective, I'll take the Lions. So, and then as a roster, we just went tit for tat with it. The Lions are better in different position groups. Yeah. Maybe wide receiver, you take the Jags, but now we're just nitpicking at this point. Give me the Lions, like you said, the offensive line. I just think they have a better situation, and the end-all, be-all is the NFC. You're in the NFC, which is a weaker conference. So you're thinking about making a Super Bowl run. You could do it.
I mean, are we spoiled by Brad Holmes at this point? Not to kind of get off on a tangent,
yes.
but when I really looked at the 2022 draft classes, the Lions versus the Jaguars, obviously the Jaguars, they got a hit in that one in the first round in Devin Lloyd, but they weren't hitting on any of their later round picks like Brad Holmes does, like Brent Veach has done very well over the last couple of years as well, which has helped the Kansas City Chiefs maintain sustained success. And when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars hits from 2021, you got 2 first-round picks and an upper second-round pick, and Lawrence Etienne and Tyson Campbell. But in order to really, really take that next step, you got to hit on some of those 4th-round picks, 6th-round picks, 3rd-round picks, which Brad Holmes certainly has, which Brent Veach has, like guys like that. So it's just a testament to how spoiled we've become that we're expecting, like, oh my goodness, those swines in Jacksonville can't even hit on a 6th-round pick. They get Gregory Jr. and we get James Houston and Malcolm Rodriguez. Tisk, tisk. But still, I'm not disrespecting the Jaguars. I think that they are definitely going to win the AFC South, and they're going to be a problem for years to come.
I mean,
they're going to be very good.
You look at the sample size you have with Brad Holmes and the amount of talent he's found past, the 4th round. I mean, Amon-Ra, James Houston, Malcolm Rodriguez. Like, you can keep going with the guys he's found. Give him 2, 3, 4, 5 more years. That's the thing. You're talking about projection. What situation you'd much rather have? The Lions, man, their trajectory is the Jaguars as well. But I'm more confident in what Brad's doing cooking back there than I am Trent Baalke. I just am. I mean, I'm sitting.
No, it's true, because that's what it came down to for me. Because I was like, yeah, this year I think the Lions definitely being in the NFC are in a better situation. But even like 4 or 5 years when Trevor's in his prime, do I really want to pick against that? But I'm like, that's going to be probably Brad Holmes' GM prime. This man's only been doing this for 2-3 seasons, and he's already performed better than any GM in the league, arguably, as far as the draft class goes, outside of Howie Roseman and GM in Philadelphia.
Howie Roseman, I forgot about him.
I'm going to give him his credit there, because that man's been killing it over in Philadelphia, too. But, I mean, the Lions have went from the worst ran organization in all of sports outside of maybe the Oakland Athletics to now having arguably one of the best GMs in the league.
Yep,
so it's
respected.
That will keep the longevity of an organization more than a quarterback. Because if a quarterback gets hurt, now you're screwed. But GM, he's not getting hurt. He's only going to get better.
I'll just say Trent Baalke is the one who took Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson, which he fell right into our hands. So if that says anything, and Trayvon I think will be a fine player, but yeah, give me Brad Holmes. And for this comment too, John Fisher, I think I don't know how to exactly pronounce your last name, but he comments, chiming in, I think rambling on about an elite quarterback in tough conference is dumb. Well, that's the argument. Like that's the whole point of this discussion. So my apologies, John. Just you could reach out to me.
We'll make this show suited for John from now on.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do. I think that's fair. I'll tell you what. We'll go to break. We get back.